That's the game changer. Expand your means. And so, yeah, if they're not focused on financial independence, which is creating cash flow from assets to cover your lifestyle, and they go buy something and they put 25% down, it's going to take longer for them to become financially independent. And people that are financially independent have a 10 times advantage because everybody else is being told, save 10% of your income, chase a 10% return, wait for 30 years. But if you have your assets covering your expenses, 100% of your active income can buy more assets. That's where you create game-changing wealth.
All right, guys, today I got a New York Times best-selling author and expert financial consultant about to drop a ton of game on you guys. I got my man Garrett Gunderson in the building. What's up, Garrett?
What's up, man? Good to be with you.
Dude, welcome to the show, my man. Appreciate you coming on, dude. Killing Sacred Cows, one of your New York best-selling Times books there. What is that book about?
It's about the 9 financial myths that hold people back. I
Mm.
mean, it's like all these lies, but they're not obvious lies. So they're subtle, and that kind of sabotages people. And so once you point it out, you can always see it and you can avoid it. So it's like the book that's the permission to succeed, the permission to get ahead.
I wanna dive into some of these myths, but just top down real quick, high level. What are the 9 myths?
All right, so the first one's the most important one, the finite pie. People believe there's only so much to go around, and that gets them into limitation and scarcity. And scarcity is the greatest destroyer of wealth. So it's about, hey, like, if it was really just a finite pie, that's like when people think that can't animals reproduce, like, money gets to keep exchanging hands. If I buy something from you, you get to take and use the money again. So it gets people to think more expansively and understand that exchange creates wealth.
That's good.
Second one is people say avoid debt like the plague, but people don't even know what the hell debt is. Yeah, that's right with consumer debt if you're borrowing to consume, but it gets people in a mindset not to think to produce. What if I could borrow money at 1% and earn 2%? That's 100% arbitrage. That's 100% return. And yet most people say, oh, if you don't understand interest, you pay it. And if you do, you earn it. Well, what about the people that earn money on other people's money, which is really a huge difference between multimillionaires and billionaires and the rest of the population? So it gets people past that notion of, oh, I can't get in debt. Well, you're not in debt. If you buy a property for $1 million that's worth 1.5, you're $500,000 in equity. If you borrowed $1 million, it's 500,000 in the positive, not $1 million in the negative. People just don't see that.
All of the world's billionaires didn't do it alone. They got there using other people's money.
3 things: other people's money, other people's time,
Mm-hmm.
and other people's ability. They're masterful at those 3 things.
They don't teach leverage in school.
No, they teach the opposite. As a matter of fact, The Economist did this article in like 2013, 2014, where they said when they taught finance in school, kids didn't end up better off, and in some cases end up worse off. Here's why. Imagine you have a teacher on a fixed income in a socialistic structure teaching people how to deal with money. It's going to all come from fear, doubt, worry, limitation, cut back, scrimp. And so that mindset plagues people instead of thinking in the real way to build wealth, which is value creation.
That's a really good point. I mean, even if you look at universities, they have business programs, but it's like, who are the teachers teaching these business classes? They're people that earn their income as an employee, trading their time for money, not business.
Yeah, so when I was 19 years old, I got into finance while I was at university. And we got this professor that decided to retire from managing $5 billion in municipal bond funds. So $5 billion, comes to our university, donates $250,000 to our class and says, get in groups of 5, everyone gets 50 grand, you get graded based upon how you actually deploy and invest this money against your benchmark. So real world experience, someone that came from that world. He ended up becoming a client. We became really good friends, and he was an early mentor to me that helped me kind of see through all this like nonsense that was being taught, because my personal finance classes in college, they taught a very limited perspective. For example, they'd say, oh, if you have a 30-year mortgage, you're going to pay more interest than a 15-year mortgage. Well, yeah, that's math, but it's not money, because we always pay interest, whether we pay cash and we forfeit the right to earn interest, or whether we borrow, we pay it. Most people only see what they pay when they borrow. They don't see what they forfeit when they don't have that capital to deploy. So
huge opportunity cost.
Right.
I talk about all the time. I'm like, people, one of the hot topics right now, especially with millennials, Gen Zers, and we're in a high rate environment. People say, should I own or should I rent where I live? And I'm like, guys, like, if you own where you live, and this has been a American fallacy for many years, it's like the opportunity cost of putting 20, 25% down on a primary house right now and not allowing you to go redeploy that capital into starting a business or investing into real estate that actually pays you cash flow and that actually has real tax advantages is a massive opportunity cost. People don't think about that.
they have the wrong frame, because they're being taught that wealth is a function of three factors. And these are three of the myths in Sacred Cows. One, it takes money to make money. Yes, you can make money on your money, but it takes relationships, ideas, it takes value in exchange. So when they don't have money, they think, oh, there's nothing I can do. Number two, they tell them high risk equals high return. Risk means chance of losing. So if we increase our chancing of losing, it doesn't help us win. And third, they say you're in it for the long haul. It gets people to think like, I'll just wait for 30 years before this pays off. Well, I believe in velocity, which is how do we keep like your money the same, but increase your output? You can do it in three ways. The worst way is to live within your means, which is cut back and reduce. The better way is to be more efficient within your means, save tax, save on interest, save on non-performing investment fees, design insurance properly so you're getting like 10% or more of your income to redeploy. Or three, expand your means. That's the game changer, expand your means. And so, yeah, if they're not focused on financial independence, which is creating cash flow from assets to cover your lifestyle, and they go buy something and they put 25% down, it's going to take longer for them to become financially independent. And people that are financially independent have a 10 times advantage because everybody else is being told, save 10% of your income, chase a 10% return, wait for 30 years. But if you have your assets covering your expenses, 100% of your active income can buy more assets. That's where you create game-changing wealth.
Yeah, and it allows you to pick your spots and be a little bit more risky if you would, especially if you already know your assets are going to cover your baseline expenses every single month.
Right. Like when I told my wife, hey, I want to do comedy. And she's like, well, shit, I don't think you're as funny as you think you are. Right. Because she's like, damn, like we're going to make a career on this. But I was already financially independent. So after I had a good set, she's like, well, if you want to do this, fine. Because we didn't have to make a living on it. Right. We were financially independent. If we're not, that's a much more risky proposition.
Yeah. Okay. So those are the 9 right there. Did we cover all 9?
We covered like 4 or 5 of them.
4 or 5. What are the
Yeah.
remainers?
So we covered you're in it for the long haul, avoid debt like the plague, high risk equals high return, the finite pie. Another thing is self-insurance.
What's that mean?
People think, okay, I'm going to get enough assets that I don't have to insure things. Like if you paid off your mortgage, you don't have to have homeowners insurance. If you're older and you have a bunch of assets, you don't have to have life insurance. That's true that you could choose not to have insurance, but I believe don't have insurance on things that are inconsequential and that you can still pay for today and have peace of mind. Like I have high deductibles, right? Because I'm not going to make a claim on a fender bender or a minor issue with my house because they'll just raise my premiums. But I actually want to have homeowners insurance because if I don't have it, I have to use my capital to insure the home. And that means if I can't deploy that and invest that and get the best return because it's acting as my homeowners insurance. And if it's $1 million I have to set aside, but it's only costing me $2,000 a year for that homeowners insurance, I can way out earn $2,000 with $1 million if it's freed up.
Yeah. And if your house is paid off, you have a lot more exposure should the house burn down or fall apart or whatever. Okay. What are the remaining 3?
Let's see if I can. A penny saved is a penny earned.
What does that mean?
Like I think that's a myth because it gets people to thinking like they're cutting corner. They're like so focused on what they can save and hold on to that they lose sight of value creation and expansion. Like my great aunt, she applied for welfare even though she had $500,000 in savings because poverty is a state of mind. And when people only think about what they can save instead of what they can create, it limits their wealth.
That's really good. And I'm actually going to pull up these topics right now in chat with Killing Sacred Cows, man. You're making me want to read this book. How long ago did this one come out?
So the first version came out in 2008, and then I rewrote it in 2023. So there's Killing Sacred Cows 2. And Sacred Cows 2 has an entire concept about investor DNA. How do you become a better investor? How do you find out which investments make sense based upon who you are? And so it just trains people that way.
I love it. So, yeah, this is really good. So I just asked chat, and I got chat right here. I said, what are the 9 myths from the book Killing Sacred Cows by my guy Garrett? This is good. So number 1, the myth of the finite pie. Number 2, the myth of the golden age. Number 3, the myth of risk-free. The number 4, the myth of the get rich quick. That's good. Number 5, the myth of the perfect investment. The myth of the simple life. Number 7, the myth of discipline. Number 8, the myth of the silver bullet. Number 9, the myth of the buy and hold. What is the myth of the buy and hold?
Yeah, that's the you're in it for the long haul. That's like, instead of focusing on cash flow, think how weird this is. They tell people, lock money into a retirement plan, wait for 30 years, never create any cash flow with it. And now when you don't have any income coming in any other place, learn how to create cash flow with this asset you've never tapped into before. Super risky.
At an age where, 59 and a half for a lot of people,
Right.
you're not at the peak of your health years either. Yeah, I feel you on that. I was taught from a young age to go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a job, and buy a single family home, diversify, invest in a 401k, a little bit in Wall Street, play it safe, don't take any risks. That's how I was taught. And I, out of college, I got a job as an air traffic controller with the FAA, federal government job. You get a pension after 25 years, which, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that was a really cool thing. But anyway, so I did it for 11 years and I did all the things they told me to do. And it works, but it doesn't really build wealth as fast as you really need it to. And so I invested in a 401k. I maxed it out every single year that I worked there. And I invested the max that they would allow. It would go up a little bit every single year. But after an 11-year government career, I had about $300,000 in there. Like, that's 11 years. I'm almost halfway into my 25-year career, and I'm, like, doing the math, and they want you to live off of 4% of your retirement account, and I think that's a safe withdrawal rate, they call it. And so I'm doing the math. I'm like, "Okay, at this rate, I'm at $300,000 after 11 years," and granted, I'm putting in the max. They don't let you put in more. I'm doing the math. I'm like, "This is not enough to live off of." Maybe I'll make it to $1 million by retirement, which a lot of my coworkers, that was the benchmark. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I got $1 million in the TSP. I got $1 million in the 401k. I've made it." So, okay, so you're telling me you're gonna live off 4% of that. That's $40,000 a year. And by the way, that's gonna be taxed as ordinary income. And by the way, if I'm a betting man, the tax rate's probably gonna go up from what it is today. And in inflation, 20 years, 25 years from now, that 40K is probably only worth 20K today or come that time. And so how am I going to live off of that? It doesn't make any sense. I'm going to be depending on Social Security. That's probably not going to be there. And so I was doing the math and I was like, you know what? This doesn't make sense. And so I cashed out my 401k at that time against everyone's advice. And I used that to go get into real estate, do my first couple real estate deals. And what I didn't know, Garrett, at the time, was that by me doing a couple real estate deals and getting into the game, I would start slowly building up that hustle on the side. And then eventually I just walked out of that day job. And now I've built all this in the last 6.5 years because of that one decision to cash out my
6 and a
401k.
half instead of the 11.
Yeah, I know.
Exponentially different because you invested in yourself, you gained new skill sets, you deployed capital in a way that was consistent with what your knowledge was, instead of just locking it away into something that, yeah, you're a millionaire on paper in 30 years, but a pauper in life because 40 grand 30 or 20 years from now, it's going to spend so small. And from 1944 to 1981, the top tax bracket was above 50%. And we didn't really spend like we do now, 38 trillion. Like, how are we going to rectify that in the future? I want to have tax advantages. I want to have a business that I can adjust for inflation. Because most people in retirement have three main enemies: interest rate fluctuations. Like, imagine someone retiring in 2022. Interest rates are really low, and it means that they're in fixed income, right? They're more like bond portfolio. They're trying to get a fixed income. Interest rates go up, their portfolio starts to lose. Inflation kicks in, starts confiscating their purchasing power. And I guess like the only good news is taxes haven't really gone up yet. But that's a really problematic position because they didn't learn to create cash flow. They didn't learn to manage their taxes, and they weren't in control of the outcome of their income when they retired.
Yeah, that's really powerful. What kind of rate of return does a fixed income security retirement fund kind of pay on average?
I mean, when interest rates are higher, like they have been, they might be able to get 5%, 6%. But during most years for 2010 to 2022, yeah, it's like a couple percent. And the problem is if bonds fluctuate, if bonds go up in value, if the interest rates go up, the bond value goes down because you have to sell your bond for less to someone else because they can get a better interest rate than what you'd offer them. So it's definitely problematic.
What is the myth of discipline?
I don't know, that just pulled that out of
Really?
thin air. Yeah,
It's not a
ChatGPT is
real
just
myth?
making stuff up right there,
Really?
man.
Damn.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's got
yeah.
okay. So what about this one? The myth of the perfect investment.
I mean, I guess investor DNA would speak to that. Just the fact that risk isn't in the investment; it's in you, the investor. And there's a lot of people that invest in things they know nothing about, which is more about risk and gambling than actually investing. And so it puts them in a dangerous position.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's crazy, man. So, why do you think that is that? Because I have my thoughts on this. But why do you think it is that the government doesn't want students and kids to go to the public school system and actually learn about how money really works?
Well, first off, if we gave it to the public school system, they would massively destroy it. Because when I went to school, I read corporate finance books and I read economics books, and they were the exact opposite, not different, the opposite of my personal finance books. So who's going to be the one? It's just kind of like how big pharma has infiltrated all the medical schools. Big finance would, they would just infiltrate and start to teach some of the wrong things. But of course, like if we look at like John Dewey in the school system from back in the day, it was basically like, we want 80% of people to just be worker bees. We want 17% of people to drop out because we want them to do the jobs that no one else will do. And it's fine if 3% are entrepreneurs. So, even some people said the Rockefellers kind of built that system as well. But ultimately, yeah, if people start understanding what to do, then they're less reliant upon a government, which is vying for their vote. I don't know beyond that.
So these are my thoughts, and let me know what you think. I believe that the central banking system, the federal government, and Wall Street has an alignment of interest to breed middle-class people. So what do they tell you when you go to school? They say, get good grades, go to college, get a job. When you do those things, you go to college, they rack you up with student loan debt. But also when you go to college, you graduate and now you get a high income earning W-2 job. They don't teach you
Highest
business.
possible tax.
They don't teach you business. They don't teach you real estate investing, but they teach you how to get a high income earning W-2 job. And that's you pay the highest tax bracket now. That's cash flow for the federal government. And then they say, play it safe, diversify, invest in your 401k, Wall Street. They don't teach you how to invest in real estate, but when you invest in Wall Street, that's cash flow for Wall Street. And then they say, hey, the American dream, go buy a single family house, start a family, lock you up in a 30-year mortgage. That's more cash flow for the central banking system. And so I believe that without the middle class, the federal government, the central banking system, and Wall Street, they don't survive.
Well, let's break it down in practically what you're saying. First off, how easy is it to get a student loan? Anyone can get a student loan. But if you have a great business idea and I have a great business idea, it takes time to get that loan. Student loans you can't bankrupt out of. So it's going to follow that person around for their whole life. Even if they just got blackout drunk and got a Canadian studies degree, they were able to get that loan that no bank would ever make to a business, but they're making to a student. Then they're indoctrinated. You said taught. I'll say it's even more indoctrinated, that time for money is the game. And the more they go to school, which would put them deeper into debt, the higher their income. But that income is based upon time and effort with degrees, not on actual value. So imagine if they're like, well, look, if I become a graduate or if I get a PhD or if I become an MD, well, they have even more debt. And almost every one of those careers, because they haven't been taught to be a business owner, is that employee mindset, which means that W-2 is at the highest tax level. And there's pressure to pay the student loan, to pay for the mortgage and everything, so that when they turn up the inflation machine or they change interest rates, they can control people with the change of interest rates that don't have assets. People have assets. Change of interest rates don't impact them on the same level as people without assets, because inflation, when you have assets, your assets grow. Wages are about, $1 that goes up in wage means inflation probably went up $3. So it's really annihilating the population. So yes, I agree with what you're saying. And I think that it's pretty strategic in some ways. And isn't it amazing the Federal Reserve is not federal nor reserve, it's a central bank, and that they're messing with interest rates. And when have they ever gotten it right? It's always like all over the place.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting, but there's also an opportunity cost when you get locked up into student loan debt. It's like, well, high percentage of your income is now going to paying those off, and it's going to take a long time to pay some of those off in some instances. But it's like, that is a huge opportunity cost for a lot of folks, unfortunately. Now, we just ended 2025, 3 consecutive rate cuts from the Fed. We've been in a high rate environment for almost 48 months now. I think February of 2022 was the first rate hike. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we're in January 26 now. That's almost 48 months. Finally, it looks like we're getting some relief. And a lot of people are saying we're going to see more rate cuts this year. How do you see this affecting the economy as a whole as we get into 2026 and 2027?
Well,
macro perspective.
Basically, they had to cut rates because when you have 5-year loans on commercial and the exposure these banks would have, if people couldn't refinance and
puts
get
a lot of
good
pressure on
loan,
stuff.
they just lose too much real estate.
And lenders don't want to be operators.
Right, and those banks, we know how bad they are when they have to, do an REO when they take over and foreclose. They don't make money on that. That becomes really devastating, and trying to buy something like that from a bank is a very huge process. So, all that pressure is if they didn't lower those interest rates, we had a really big problem on our hands. I know that they said they raised it because of, a response to COVID and inflation, but we were given PPP money. We were just throwing money around, and we were doing quantitative easing, which was just putting a ton of money on people's books. And the reason why Silicon Valley Bank and places like that got into trouble is because when they got a bunch of money, rather than deploying that capital, they sat on it. And then when interest rates went up, their values of what they were storing went down. And when they said, "Hey, we're going to put more money in the economy," it's not like it went directly to the people. It went to Wall Street companies that then bought back stock rather than building infrastructure. So they thought, "Oh, this is really going to help the economy out." All it did was bloat the economy, create tons of inflation, and we responded by raising interest rates. Who did that hurt? It hurt the average person, not the person that was really wealthy. So now we're looking at this saying, all right, what are we going to do? Because wages haven't gone up and housing prices have become really big for young kids, especially, right? Like older people are doing fine, but young kids have been suffering.
They
So
can't
that's
get in the game.
right. Can't get in the game. And we just keep seeing like the baby boomers and the elderly basically voting themselves in the treasury at the expense of the young people. It just happens over and over. It's really damaging. And by the way, we have so many trillions of dollars passing, hands in the next few years because of baby boomers that are retiring and selling
They're
businesses.
calling this the greatest transfer of wealth in American history. 40 million retiring baby boomers in the next 7 years. All that wealth is going to change hands. I mean, last time I looked, I think it was the boomers held about 51% of all wealth in America. And the millennials, to put it in perspective, was only about 9% of all wealth. It's probably shifted a little bit since, but that's a lot of wealth that's going to change hands. The Gen Zers is much less than that. I'm going to look it up right now as we speak, but it's big opportunity. Now, what was the real reason they raised the rates? You said they said it's because of inflation. What was the real reason they did it, in your estimation?
Because look, when they put people in charge and they quantitatively eased, right? They put tons of money on balance sheets because I want to be really clear. When they say they're printing money, they're not physically printing that much money in that short of a period of time. It gets added to balance sheets of banks, like especially investment banks at Wall Street, and then just regular banks. And when that money didn't start moving and get deployed, then it started to they had to battle that. They had, what are we going to do about this, right? And so when they first started to raise interest rates, it started to create a problem because we saw 3 banks went under. And I think there was supply issues, there was people not working and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of underlying factors. It just gave them a chance to acquire assets, in my opinion. Raise interest rates, people can't pay it, that shifts back.
Yeah, absolutely. And so real quick, I pulled this up while
Because
you
look
were
how
talking.
much did BlackRock buy during that time, for example?
No, you're right. You're
Right?
right. So I pulled this up real quick. So this is really intriguing. The estimated U.S. wealth breakdown in America. And by the way, it's about 330 million Americans. And this is how it breaks down from generations. So currently, the baby boomers hold about 51% of all wealth in America. And the millennials and the Gen Zers combined only hold about 10% of all wealth in America. And so in these next 7 years, you got 40 million boomers that are retiring. All their businesses, all their assets is going to change hands. All that wealth is going to change hands and shift over to the millennials and Gen Zers. But you got a lot of millennials and Gen Zers that they don't care to learn about how money works. They don't care to learn about how business or real estate works. They're too busy watching sports and playing fantasy football, playing video games in their parents' basement. And so, what does that mean for people listening to the show right now? I think there's a huge opportunity for the folks that actually put in the work, they get educated, they learn how money works, they get in the right rooms to benefit from this transfer of wealth. I know I'm excited. And if you're listening to the show right now, you should be excited too, because it's going to be a massive opportunity.
Right, because I don't plan on ever stop working because every year I'm getting more wisdom. I'm not an athlete that I'm losing a step. I'm in business where I'm learning more. So there's a huge opportunity there with all this money transferring hands. And it's also nice if interest rates keep going down because they're going to have to get loans to buy those assets, right? So that's going to be helpful in that transition as well.
It said the silent generation holds about 12%. What the heck is the silent generation?
Are they the ones older than baby boomers? The
It
other,
must be. Why
Yeah.
why did they call them the silent generation?
because we don't even know who they are.
Or they didn't have a voice or what?
Yeah, they just went to work and came home, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, shoot, I think there's gonna be a big opportunity out there. I know we're in the hotel game, and we're taking advantage of, buying these boutique hotels from these retiring mom and pop owners. And, love them or hate them, but love the mom and pops, but they just didn't really understand business strategy. They didn't understand how to implement tech. They didn't believe in reinvesting into their assets, so a lot of their hotels are very, very tired and outdated. They don't believe in like investing into good marketing photos, and a lot of them, this piece of hotel that they own was the only piece of real estate they ever owned in their ever. And so we can pick them up at a discount, and then we can renovate them, implement the tech, the AI, good marketing strategies, and we can, by doing so, force a lot of appreciation. So that's how we're taking advantage of this big shift right now in the hotel game. But if you're listening to this right now, this is like every sector of business, or maybe you have a high income earning W-2 and you're like, hey, I'm happy with where I'm at. Great. I think that's cool. Now, maybe your wife wants to get a side hustle. Cool. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to go pick up all these small businesses for pennies on the dollar, add a lot of value, and pick up another stream of income for you and your family.
I have a client that his whole model is he finds out in a town, like, where's a must-go restaurant, but not like a fancy restaurant, like a pancake house or an old school easy steak house, not like, again, just what are the simple places, like a little diner, right? That's a burger joint. And he goes in and he buys the real estate, and then he buys from these baby boomers that are aging and immediately improves labor costs, immediately invests into it. So now he owns the real estate and he owns the business, but he just puts a small down payment and then buys out the owner with the cash flow from the business. And he's able to do that because if he goes in and he improves it and adds technology and all the things you're talking about, so now he has real estate and he has a business, and he is crushing it doing that, just crushing it. Because these people are tired, man. If you worked in a restaurant your whole life and you're 70, someone's like, I'll give you a down payment and pay you $600,000 a year, and they turn around and double that on what they're making, and they have the real estate too. That's one example.
Yeah. So, I think the other big thing, or the other big reason that people don't get into learning money, is because they're hanging out in the wrong circles. They're hanging out with the wrong in the wrong rooms. I mean,
Complaining more than creating.
I was a function of that. When I was working ATC, I was working in a room full of people that weren't thinking about money. Some of them are, but a lot of them are not.
And the way they think about it, like I think most people speak poverty into existence through the complaints that they make, through the victimhood that they believe in, through the unfairness that they believe in the system, the pointing the figures. Like, you know how many people in the world hate billionaires? And I'm going, what would the world be like without them? I mean, almost every great thing that has come about was at least financed by a billionaire, even if they didn't invent it. From the printing press, which we know about Gutenberg and the printing press, but there was a wealthy German that actually financed it. It would have been an idea that wouldn't have gotten off the ground. Or most transportation routes were financed by wealthy individuals. And so I don't know if you saw that video where Billie Eilish was like, hey, we shouldn't have billionaires. There shouldn't be a thing as a billionaire. You should give your money away. I'm like, well, she's worth $50 million. Maybe she should start. Because where are you going to give the money to? Who's going to do a better job with it? Like, the people that do the best job earn more money, and they're like a steward. It's like someone that's saying, oh, it's not fair. You're lifting too much weight. Let's let this other person that can't do it get under that weight. It's going to squash them. Same thing with money. But people just have this kind of like erroneous belief that if one person has more, it means less for another, instead of, we're so much wealthier now than a couple hundred years ago. Like, the average person lives like the top people did back then. Just because we keep compounding and building upon ideas, the level of poverty, even though there is plenty, has substantially decreased. The level of hunger has decreased, even though the population has increased because of prosperity. King Louis XIV, he lived in the Palace of Versailles, but they didn't have plumbing. He couldn't get a variety in food. He couldn't travel around the world at a moment's notice. And if he wanted to have music, he had to hire a quartet. A middle-class person can have so many things because of value creation. And our lives are blessed by people adding more value, and the billionaires bring more. Now, I'm sure there's some ones that are bad, but I've spent time with 23 of them, and I thought they were pretty amazing. I thought what they were up to mattered. I thought the way they viewed the world, I thought they were very generous with their time when I sat down with them. And yet they're going to be vilified by the masses who don't have hope for the future, who are not sure what to do with the next step, that think that someone else owes them something. If people don't learn to take responsibility, they're going to be enslaved forever. Like, freedom and prosperity require responsibility. That's why most people struggle with it. But victimhood gets to say it's someone else's fault, and therefore people stay stuck, and then they keep speaking poverty into existence with every word, with every thought, with every action.
You spent time with how many billionaires?
23. I had 20 that I spoke to in 2021. I was a presenter, and then I got to hang out with them for 2 days. And I become friends with a couple of them, but got to sit down, have dinner, have conversations. And I've spent time with 3 others that weren't in that room that time.
Of the 23 billionaires you spent time with, what is the one common trait that all of them had?
So I narrowed it down to every single one of them used other people's money, other people's time, and other people's ability. They were in a room talking. Everyone had 15 minutes to say what they were up to, and they were still raising capital, even though they had enough capital for it themselves, because they have their core business that's their driver. One owned all these gas stations that you'd see all over the place. That was a driver for them, but they still had other investments. They had a family office. They had their own financial team in the room. They all spent substantial money to save on tax. One individual in the room, their tax team cost them $8,500,000 for the year, but saved them 9 figures, so it was worth it, right? So they all had good tax strategy. They were all super collaborative. You talk about this all the time. They were all sharing their best practices, their best ideas. They were seeing how they could support one another, making connections. Dude, the very first speaker was the Secretary of Defense that day, and he told them the problems with China, and I watched people moving money. And then the second speaker was talking about mental health. They're donating $170 million to mental health, and they talked about suicide the whole time, so I was supposed to go last. They brought me in next, like, oh, it's getting dark. We need some comedy. It was a little stressful. But like when I spoke, the billionaire said, you're putting words to how we think. We appreciate it. And that's what I got connected with them and got to keep talking to them. But I just saw that collaboration. I saw that tax strategy. I saw they had a comprehensive financial team. And I saw that they were still raising capital to continue to expand their vision, even though some own sports teams and they had plenty. It wasn't like they wanted more money so they could do less. They wanted more money so they could do more. And that is completely different than the retirement philosophy, where people are like, I just want to have enough so I can stop working. They're like, the more we have, the more impact we can have. And sure, it's kind of like a game sometimes where they're just making a lot of money. One person had sold their business for $50 billion that was in the room. And of all the people, he was probably the least happy. He had the most problem with his kids. He didn't have a purpose of what to do next in life, right? The other people were really engaged. One was like, hey, we're gonna fund ways to help sex trafficked workers to get out of that and get a mental health, right? They all had like this philanthropic purpose. And I'm like, so these are the people we're going to villainize? These people that are doing all this good and they're collaborating at this level and the rest of the world is complaining about them? We should be learning from them instead of picking whatever a-hole billionaire that nobody likes and say that that's the one that everybody should dislike. But even people love to hate on Elon. I love that dude. Starlink's changed my life.
Yeah.
He saved the damn, the people that were stuck in space. He's creating so much value for the world.
We got Starlink at one of our hotels. So one of our hotels is up in area called Bodega Bay. And the internet infrastructure there is not good. So we use Starlink there. I have Starlink on my boat. I'm a big fan of, Starlink. It's we never had something like that until now.
Yeah, he's helped when there was the floods in the Carolinas. And yet people just love to hate on him for whatever reason, because they think that he's taken more than his fair share. But what they're not recognizing is how many millionaires have been made because of him, how many people's lives have been improved. It's this weird kind of like thought process that sometimes the internet makes worse to get people to hate on someone because they have more than someone else. And they say, you should redistribute that wealth. Well, guess what? You give it to the wrong hands, they're not going to know what to do with it. Yeah, it might help them temporarily, just like giving someone a meal. Yeah, it'll help them temporarily. But if they don't know what to do next, they're going to be back to that same struggle and never learn the lesson.
What's that saying where they say like, take away all the money from a billionaire, he's going to make it back, and then give a poor person a lottery ticket, and if they win the lottery, they're going to lose it all in a couple of years.
Yeah, and have you seen the data on that?
No.
Someone that wins the lottery is more likely to die or go to jail than keep any level of that money. And part of it's because imagine if someone finds out they win the lottery, everyone's like, you didn't earn that money. You owe me. Remember that time I did you a favor? Long lost cousins.
So
and
they start getting sued?
And they start coming out. They want them to pay for everything. They talk them into buying tigers. And, like the next thing you know, it's all gone because they've spent more than they had, because it's a mindset. If you don't know what to do with the money and you have it, it will destroy you. If you could earn the money, whether you got that money or not, it will be fitting for you. And that's the difference. And yeah, they say you could take all the money, redistribute it to everyone in the world. Within 5 years, it would end up back in the same hands.
With a billionaire.
Yeah, because you could just say, hey, we're going to take everyone's money and all of us in the world, all get equal amounts, and it's going to end up back in the same proportion within 5 years because it's your mindset, it's your value creation, it's your stewardship, it's your skill sets, it's what you can do to serve others and solve problems. And if it gets into a mindset where people are just thinking, what can I buy? Their money's going to die. But if it's what can I create and how can I increase and invest in myself? How can I grow into that? Because if people's money their money grows, but they don't grow with it, that gap is called risk. And that gap is where they lose everything. But if you grow yourself and you grow your money, you're going to sustain that money, right?
That's so good.
Have you seen that with I saw people that crushed it in crypto early on that are broke now because they didn't know what they had and they didn't know what to do with it. It was just kind of like luck.
Well, I still don't fully understand what crypto is, to be honest with you.
Well, most of it's nothing, just so you know. 99% of it will not exist in the future at all. It's not anything.
That's why I'm 100% in real assets, like real estate.
Your investor DNA.
Yeah.
You know, hotels. You have a skill set, an intelligence, a network. It's a different system for you because you get it. You're building it. You're part of it. Most people are so disconnected from their money. Like if someone says, here's my money, I'm going to give it to someone I barely know. They're going to give it to someone else that I don't know at all. And they're going to invest in companies I've never been in the boardroom of. That's risky because it's away from the chain of value. The closer you are where you can have influence, where you can have ideas, where you can make suggestions or changes or know what's happening, that's how people mitigate and reduce risk. But most people think, I don't have time. That's a lie. People have the time. They've just been lied to by places like Wall Street. I mean, would you trust Wall Street with anything in your life? Would you say like, hey, let me hand Wall Street my boat? You never get that boat back.
Grant Cardone once told me, this is years ago, the first time I had him on my old podcast, this is April 2020. He said, until I own the casino, I ain't going in the casino. And he called Wall Street like it's a casino.
When they tell you it takes money to make money, it doesn't take their money, it takes your money and they make money. They say high risk equals high return. They don't take the risk and they get a percentage of your money no matter what the return.
Yeah.
Right? They tell you it's
even if you're
the long haul,
money.
but they're getting money the whole time through. They're creating cash flow. They're like, it's complete leverage through ignorance because you don't know and they sell fear. You trust the wolf, right? Like there's no movie of Wall Street that is inspiring. Wall Street's about drugs. Wolf of Wall Street's, even more drugs and Boiler Room's drugs and Ben Affleck,
Big old Jordan Belfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's never like an
America
inspiring
loves them.
story. Right. But it's interestingly enough, when Wall Street came out, 400% higher rate of people applying to be brokers because they still wanted the private jets and they still wanted that. They wanted the lifestyle without the substance. They didn't want to do the work that it took to get there. They just wanted the outcome. And that's where people take a ton of risk with their money. They want an outcome of being wealthy, but they don't have the strategy to get wealthy.
Yep. No, 100%. So what is the investor DNA?
So it's like, what do you value? Because your values dictate what you'll pay attention to. What drives you that you really want to learn about? And like, you have to have some interest in boutique hotels to be spending the amount of time and knowledge that you have. And then it's where your competencies, where do you grow that skill? And so you invest in alignment with that investor DNA. Like some people's investor DNA is real estate, but there's 1,000 ways to do real estate, right? Some people like spreadsheets. They like looking at numbers. They like deal flow. They like to think about how they put together a puzzle to make a property more valuable. Other people love to just fix and flip because they're more like that, hands-on type of person. Then there's intellectual property. I look at the 10 books I've written as each is a piece of real estate. That's why I rewrote Killing Sacred Cows, because if you had a property since 2008, you'd probably change the carpet. You'd probably paint the walls. You'd probably update the technology. I even rewrote What Would the Rockefellers Do in 2023 as well, because that was a big book. But I look at those as pieces of real estate because intellectual property could be that. Or businesses. Like business, real estate, and intellectual property are the three biggest assets that drive the most cash flow and value, yet most people are trained it's all other people's companies like stocks or bonds that ultimately isn't probably not going to move the needle as far as you want.
What does wealth mean to you?
My ability to be present.
So time?
It's like, am I doing what I love with those people that I love? And am I engaged in life? Like, I think finance wants you to think wealth is an out in the future destination. And they tell you if you just do things you hate now and sacrifice, you'll get to live a life that you love in the future. But the thing is, you'll miss out on all the moments along the way because it's always about getting somewhere instead of understanding what you already have and living that life of gratitude and love and enjoyment and recognition. So it's more about depth and presence than it is about achievement. When people get addicted to achievement, they're usually unhappy, and even that achievement, it kind of like they get it and it's like it didn't hit like they thought it would. I remember I was interviewing, you mentioned Grant, I was interviewing him one day and he's like, yeah, we got this big thing yesterday, we've been working on it for years. I'm like, did you celebrate? He goes, no. On to the next thing. I'm like, you got to enjoy the process along the way. You got to fall in love with the journey. The win is in the work, not just the outcome. The outcome is a byproduct of a life well lived. So people that have true wealth, yeah, they have money, they have purpose, they have the right mindset, they have the right social life and relationships, and they have health. It's 5 tracks strong. If you have those 5 things, you don't have to be balanced in them. You just have to be intentional with them.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really time, health, freedom. Without time, nothing really matters, and without freedom, it's nothing really matters either. And so I think that's true wealth to me. I don't have kids yet, but I know I have a lot of friends that have kids, and they're like, dude, it's life changing. Do you have kids?
I do have 2.
2. How old are they?
18 and 20.
18 and 20.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest takeaway after having kids for 18 and 20 years?
There's a different depth of love that I could experience by having my kids. Like, it's cool to have my wife loves something as much as I love that, right? And like we work on it together, and we're like, you birthed these huge ass humans, and like my son, my oldest, is like, I've taken him hunting this year, and he's just like, hey, he's just such a nice human being, and it's cool to watch him grow and then have this like really deep relationship. And my 18-year-old he wants to go to school, and I was like, hey man, that's fine. I think AI is going to disrupt that, but if you go to school, just build relationships, meet girls, have fun. Don't like waste your time in general education that doesn't really mean anything, because all that information is going to be at your fingertips and free and more effective. But it was cool because he wrote this, whole thing about how I was his hero because he lifts because I lift, and because he's now has a sales job because I told him that'd be a good idea to go into sales at 18 so you can learn real skills. And so it's really cool that I have this influence of someone that I love dearly, would do anything for. Like with kids, I mean, they were one of the few people on the planet I would put far ahead of me without a second thought. Same with my wife. It's like that level of depth of love, and also that level of like effort that it takes to train them versus a client. So super easy with a client. With a kid, sometimes they're like, whatever. So you just have to be there when they're ready. And then when they ask the question, and those are special, really cherished moments,
Yeah, that's really good. So what other pieces of advice would you tell a high school kid, a teenage kid that's 15, 16, that maybe wants to go to college? You mentioned a couple that you told your son, go get a job in sales. Sales is probably the number one skill that you could learn early on. Everything I do today is sales. And my first sales job was when I was 18 years old, selling cell phones out of a kiosk before everyone had cell phones. And guess what? I was uncomfortable just talking to strangers at that time, but I did not make money unless I actually said hi and started talking to strangers. And so I learned a lot of my social skills from that. Now, you also said, if you're going to go to college, don't worry about the grades, focus more on relationships. What other key pieces of advice would you give someone that's 15, 16, 17 years old right now?
Because no one's ever asked me my grades in college, not one person. I got exactly what it took to keep my scholarship. I felt like if I worked an ounce harder than that on classes I didn't care about, like I took a nutrition class where the food pyramid is now the opposite of the new food pyramid. So it was already outdated back then. So I made relationships with, I became friends with professors. I got to know them. I became a senator at the school. So I learned outside the classroom, and we hosted tons of parties, dude. We had people at our place all the time, which is great memories. I just went to the hockey game with 2 of my college roommates, and we're still laughing about the stuff that we did. That some of the best days were the days we did nothing because we were young and we just had fun, And I even think when you get to be an adult, just asking, how can I make this a little bit more fun? Like, I think we win when we play. So if I'm talking to a 15-year-old, I'm like, hey, get out and enjoy your life. Put yourself out there. My son, when he was 13, did stand-up comedy, which gave him a whole different level of being able to handle things, test things out, try things out. And then eventually he didn't think it was as cool and was worried about what his friends would think. But it's like, man, when you're young and the stakes are low, because everyone roots for kids. Like if I see a kid try something, I'm going to cheer them on. I'm going to encourage them. If it doesn't go great, no problem. I started a business when I was 15 years old. My nephew, who's 12, he's already had multiple businesses. because right now he can set up a website on AI in 5 minutes. So you just put yourself out there. You learn by doing. You build friendships, and you invest in those friendships. I just had all my high school buddies to my cabin, people I knew since the day I was born. One kid's 30 days difference in age. Another guy I met in ninth grade. Another guy I played Little League with, and we just hung out. And it's cool because now we're in deeper conversations, but there's riches in relationships. And those relationships are in-person relationships, not just gamers online. So what you do is you make yourself uncomfortable. You ask a lot of girls out. You get told no. You get over it because you'll be fine the next day. And you find the things that you can be super excited about as a hobby. And maybe some of those things turn into your career, but you don't let anyone else tell you you can't do it. You just go for what you want, because if you think big and you act on that, you can have anything if you believe it. It might take longer than you expect. There's going to be failures along the way. There's going to have to be resilience and becoming resourceful, but that's what makes it worth it. If you just thought, oh, I want this, and you had it, it gets boring. But if it's like, I want this and I work for it and I learn about myself in that work, go for it. But yeah, sales, learn about finance, learn about how to build relationships. Those three things will take you far.
Finance. Now, how do you learn finance when you're 17, 18 years old?
I wrote a kid's book called I Am Money with this amazing children's author. She sold like 4 million copies of books. That book, even if someone's in kindergarten, will change the way they view money, because money is the character. You go to successful people. When I was 16 years old and had my business, 17 years old, I had a red memo pad, and I would just go talk to people I thought had a lot of money. Sometimes they just had a big house. I didn't know I was a kid, but people will talk to you when you're a kid. And so I even flew to New York when I was 18 years old, got into meetings behind closed doors when I was 19 that I shouldn't have been in, because people thought, oh, this is cool. This kid wants to know something. You leverage your young age. People would tell me, well, maybe you're too young. Too young was actually what allowed me to get in those rooms, ask the questions, and have the conversations.
That's really good. Do you believe in the saying that you should find what you really love, your true passion, and build a business around that?
I don't know. I think that's dangerous, because what if you love dumb things that nobody else really cares about? I mean, in the world of the internet, you don't know. I think that find something that you can get healthily obsessed with, but not just something like that is a hobby. We have to make a distinction between a hobby that we enjoy doing. Like, I know people that'll be like, oh, I love to fish. They become a fishing guide. They hate it. They love to hunt, so they try to create a little outfit or thing around it just to get right off. It's very limited. It's not scalable. It ends up making them turn against the things that they love, because it ends up being something that they didn't intend it to be. So yes, find something that is so compelling you to dedicate your life to it, but realize that you're not going to love every aspect of it. And you can refine that over time, because if you start with sales, maybe you're not going to be a salesperson your whole life, but sales will translate to every area of life, right? Whether it's marriage, whether it's, business, whether it's art. The people that know sales know how to master something, and then that becomes very influential. So eventually, when you find a way that you can make a living, then go like, I started selling life insurance. I'm not passionate about life insurance, but that was a stepping point in sales where I was like, what could I do that would be more fun than life insurance? And then I gave up my licenses, started writing books. Like, it was a springboard. So start somewhere that helps fill that skill set, and then you can start pursuing a little bit more passion. But if you go only passion, you might enthusiastically run in a direction that makes you broke.
If someone is wanting to start a business, become an entrepreneur, become a business owner, and they don't know sales yet, do you feel that it's a mandatory prerequisite to go learn sales for a year or two before you start the business?
Look, when I sold my company in 2020, did a little comedy jaunt for a while, got my special on Amazon Prime, and then I was like, all right, I'm not going to be a comedian the rest of my life. What am I going to do? And then I started this new business, and I was like, I need to learn how to sell this new product. And so I gave it a few months where I got really good at it, wrote the manuals, trained the team, and now I'm not involved in sales at all. So even me being in business since 1998 and in the financial business, I went back to selling just to refine what I was doing and make sure I could communicate it properly. I could write better about it. Being involved in that process to some degree is instrumental. And even if you start a business, you better be in the sales department if you've never had a business before until you move out of it. Otherwise, it's going to just be something you don't understand. You won't know how to speak about the business. You won't know how to influence other people from the stage, all that kind of stuff. It is going to be instrumental in everything you do. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I mean, it's not just that, but it's, leading the team. Like you got to sell your team on the vision every single week.
You're
This is the
selling your
direction that we're
team. You're
going.
selling, yeah, you're selling
You're
the
selling good
clients.
people to come work for
Yep.
you. Clients, customers, investors, negotiating a hotel that we're going to buy. I'm selling the broker why we're going to be the best buyer for this deal. Vendors, like every single vendor that we work with, every single third party, we are selling to why they should work with us and give us the most competitive rate out of everyone else.
I still listen to programs that help with sales. Even though I don't get involved in sales with my team, because I was able to really help manage, monitor, and build that and then turn it over. I call that delegation, where most people relegate. I don't want to deal with this. And they outsource the insecurities. When we outsource our insecurities, we have risk. We rely too much on someone else. And if they go away, we have nothing. But if we build something that they can enhance, if they go away, it's backfilled. There's a structure. There's something to it. We could take over temporarily until we find the next person.
Yeah. Even like podcasting, like early on when I was growing the podcast from nothing, it's like convincing bigger name guests to come on the show. That's a form of sales. That's all sales, right? And so I think every aspect of business is sales. And I don't know. I know if I didn't know sales, I wouldn't have a business.
Yeah, I'm with you. Sales, marketing,
Yeah.
relationships, all that
But I will
matters.
say this: one of my good friends, Zeb Evans, he's the founder of ClickUp, and their value probably about 6-7 billion right now, and he's trying to take it to about 20-25 bill before they exit. But they just turned down an offer from Intuit for 6 billion, and he's got about 2,500 employees. The dude's only 36 years old, and he doesn't know sales. He's kind of like a computer, like software, like engineer background, and he doesn't know sales, but he's been able to build that without knowing sales. So I think it can be possible, but I think it makes it a lot more challenging.
Yeah. It's kind of like there's some people that, like Chappelle doesn't really have social media yet. He's pretty much the biggest comedian there is. But most every other comedian has social media. There's always those outliers. And it's if you just have something so dynamic, irresistible, over the that everybody would want, then you don't have to follow the rules necessarily.
Yeah. What was your core business that you sold?
So we started by basically doing financial coaching with implementation, but we'd outsource the implementation. So we vetted attorneys and accountants and investment advisors, and we would be like their point person and help them kind of go through and how do they get financially fit? How do they get financially independent with cash flow? And how do they, just get their financial house in order? And the problem with that is I just built that business, even though it was a nice sized business, a cash machine. The values of one of my partners and I didn't match. And so I just got to the point where I was like, well, this isn't fun for me anymore. And it was a really hard decision to sell because I had all these clients. We had 2,200 people paying us monthly and, but it just wasn't a fit. So the nice thing is I just I want to do something creative, did comedy around the topic of money, wrote a couple books. And then I came back and I was able to fix the problems with that business, which is before when we'd outsource to accountants and attorneys, that's slippage, it's leakage, it's breakage, and it's more work for the entrepreneur. So I've been able to partner with the right attorneys and accountants, and through AI and technology, we can get people's taxes done more efficiently. And because we have this command center with all of their data, we see how it impacts their corporate structure, their asset protection. So we have the full picture, which gives us a huge advantage because I think 2/3 of the reasons why people save tax have more to do with how they classify their income than their deductions. Most time deductions are pretty simple. I mean, yeah, there's a lot that people miss, but if we could go from active to passive income, that's better for tax purposes. If we go from ordinary income to capital gains, that's a huge difference. There's tax-free strategies like Section 1202, which under the new law says if you have a business that's a C Corp for at least 3 years, you can sell for 50% of $50 million or $15 million tax-free. If you wait for 5 years, 100% of $15 million per partner. So that's a tax-free classification or tax arbitrage, which is, I don't like to see people spend $1 to save 37 cents. I want to see them spend $1 and get more than $1 back. So that's tax arbitrage. So we've been really good at bringing all those services inside so that all of those people communicate. But the problem is there's firms that do that, but they're like 18 grand a month. We're now able to offer that for like $1,500 a month because of the technology. Because with AI, we can just have our attorney, his image and likeness, give a little talk with a PowerPoint about what we're doing, and he'll sign off on it. He doesn't have to meet with the client and bill him $600 an hour. It's all done through it's a game changer in finance.
Yeah. Garrett, this has been a pleasure, man. So much game, so much value. Where can the folks get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you, but also your tax business?
Yeah, if you want to know about the tax stuff, go to Garrett B. Gunderson on Instagram and just put Tax Navigator, and I'll hook you up with a checklist so you can see, are you missing deductions? What can you do? What are the reclassifications? It's free. And GarrettGunderson.com is the website. YouTube is, Garrett.live in an internet browser.
There it is. We got to thank Dan Martell for connecting us. He is Garrett Gunderson. I'm Rich Summers. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.